everybody, welcome back to Prayers of Jesus. I'm Tanya.
I'm Christina.
And I'm Drew.
And this is week 2. We're going to be studying the Lord's Prayer this week.
This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we have also forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one.
Ustedes deben orar así. Padre nuestro que estás en el cielo, santificado sea tu nombre. Venga tu reino, hágase tu voluntad, en la tierra como en el cielo. Danos hoy nuestro pan cotidiano. Perdónanos nuestras deudas, como también nosotros hemos perdonado a nuestros deudores. Y no nos dejes caer en tentación, sino líbranos del maligno.
So that was the Lord's Prayer. So we want to first begin with why does Jesus suggest that as a prayer, as an example of a prayer? Why does he choose that short, simple prayer for us to set an example of?
Yeah, I think to me, one of the first things that stands out is the fact that Jesus uses our Father as a way to start it out. That when Jesus is saying, not only to his disciples, but to anybody who's ever going to hear these words, God is like a parent. That's a really interesting thing to me. For y'all, why do y'all think that Jesus would choose to have us think of God as a parent like that?
The reason I think God would want us to think of him as a parent is because he loves us with a love that is unconditional. It's a love that nobody really understands. We all know that our parents love us, and our parents' love is something very strong, and God's love is stronger than that. It's something to understand.
Yeah, so I think we can never comprehend the love of Jesus, or sometimes we can't even comprehend the love of our own parents or our parental figures. So yeah, I think that's a really good way that for us to just start off a prayer with acknowledging that he's our Father. But yeah, I think I also really like the Lord's Prayer because it's just a very kind of nice, sweet, short, like to the point almost. Like it's very like, like it says before that, the context of just like these Gentiles, they have these long, like lavish prayers. They use all this.
Oh yeah, just thinking about the way, at least in my life, I've seen people who it seems like they were praying just to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
They were just praying as long as they could. They wanted to say as many words as they could to make themselves seem fancy and like, oh, I'm so fancy, I know all of these words I can say to God. And yet Jesus here has a really simple prayer that he teaches us to use. And I think that's a really meaningful thing, that you don't have to have like gone to college to study the Bible to be able to pray to God. Like Jesus says, here's a really simple prayer. Here's a way that you can talk to God, and it doesn't have to be all fancy.
Yeah. And there's no fluff around it. It just gets to the point. Like he knows our hearts. He knows our intentions, and it just very simple prayer to just to pray to Jesus with. Yeah. So we already touched on like the first part where we talk about our Father in heaven, but and then the next part is hallowed be thy name. We want to talk about why do we start off not only with like your Father in heaven, our Father in heaven, but like also the hallowed be thy name part.
Sure, I think when I hear hallowed be your name, for a long time I just said those words and I didn't really know what they meant very well.
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel like that's a lot of folks.
Fancy.
Yeah, but from what I understand, hallowed just means holy.
Mm-hmm.
So just trying to acknowledge who God is, that God, you're holy, and we're going to start out our prayer recognizing this is who you are. And I think that sort of helps put us in the right mindset of, we're talking to somebody who is holy and set apart, and yet is still like a parent to us. Somebody who is so much holier than we can ever be, and yet still chooses to listen to us and chooses to be a parent to us.
Yeah. I definitely think it's just really important to just begin off a prayer with just acknowledging like who he is, that he's holy, which is great. Yeah. So the next part, that kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is. So what is it? That's probably one of the most popular things that is prayed. Like this prayer in general is a very familiar prayer. Like a lot of people either have it memorized or if they've heard it, even if they're not a part of the church, But what does that part like actually mean? What are we actually saying to God and saying that section?
When I think about God's will being done, I try to think about, okay, well, what does God or what does Jesus say about the world? What kind of world does God want? What is God's dream of how the world is supposed to be? So I think of the ways that in the Bible it says in God's kingdom there's equality, like that God doesn't have favorites of, oh, well, this person was able to put a whole lot more money in the collection plate, so they're the ones that God likes. Or this person has more power, so they're the kind of person that God is going to want to have in charge. Instead, God talks about how the people who are meek, the people who are down and out, the people who everybody else says don't matter, that God chooses to say, you matter to me. You're the people who I love deeply, and you're the people who I've come to bring good news to. Like in Isaiah, it talks about how so much of God's heart is tied up with bringing good news to the poor, to the downtrodden, to the people who are having a hard time. And I don't know, when I think about God's kingdom coming, I think of people who are typically not listened to well, their voices being heard. And I don't know, especially in these times, hearing about God's kingdom coming, I think about justice and people being treated right instead of being hurt or being pushed to the side.
Definitely don't think that God's kingdom looks like the way the world doesn't look like that right now. And it's just knowing and understanding who God is and what He would want, what is His will, and what He wants for us. It's not often what we're seeing in our world, and it's painful and it hurts. But I think we all have a part in playing, or we all have a part in helping God's will happen here on earth. Yeah, I think that's a very important part of this prayer. It's just kind of taking a step back and realize that God's will is better than my own. And again, saying that towards the beginning of the prayer, saying, before I even ask for anything, let your will be done, because it's better than my own.
Right, and your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah.
We think about heaven and we think about everybody being united, and there's nobody who's pushed aside, there's nobody who said, oh, well, you're not equal to everybody else. We talk about heaven as a place where we've got all nations and all tribes and all languages praising God together. And you're right, we don't see that today. But if we're praying, God, we want your kingdom to come, we want your will to be done here on earth,
Yeah.
then that means we're praying, God, help us to make the world look like your dream of what the world should look like.
For sure.
So when Jesus teaches us to pray by saying, give us today our daily bread, instead of give us all the bread we're ever going to need, why do you think Jesus teaches us to pray that way?
I think in saying, like, there's a reason why it's not thank you for this bread that I already have. It's like acknowledging that, like, this food, all of these things that I have, like, it is not mine. It's God's. Like, He has given it to me, He's provided it for me, and it's interesting because it's like right after it talks about asking for forgiveness. So not only asking for bread, we ask for forgiveness. He's already given us forgiveness. Like, He's already forgiven us. But it's just the fact that we are still coming to Him and asking Him for it. Like, it's acknowledging that, like, that He's the one providing it for us, and like He's the one, like, providing us with food. He's the one that's taking care of us, feeding us.
I like that because it sort of connects with, it's not so much that we're asking God for all these things because God's not going to give it to us until we ask.
Mm-hmm.
But by asking, it reminds us who's the one who's giving.
Yeah.
So we're saying, God, please make your will on earth as it is in heaven. But we know that God's already working on that. It's just a reminder that we need to join in and that God's already doing that. God's going to be providing the food that we need, but we ask because that reminds us that God is our provider. And to the same thing you're saying on the next part, we're asking for forgiveness. We know that God's already forgiving us, but it reminds us that we've done wrong and we need to work at that so that we can, make things right to the people around us.
Yeah.
I think that's a really helpful way of looking at it.
Yeah. Okay. And of course, like, that last section is lead us not into temptation and deliver us from evil. So what is that saying? What are we saying to God in that? And how? And yeah.
Okay, so if we're talking about God, we don't want to be led into temptation, and we want God to deliver us from evil. That's Jesus saying, like, I understand that the world has a lot wrong with it. There's a lot in Jesus' time that was wrong, just like there's a lot right now that's wrong. And I think that's Jesus saying it's okay to ask God for help dealing with all the things that are wrong in the world. Like, there are a lot of things that are evil, and yet we're still living in this world. He gives us a chance to say, God, help us out in the middle of this.
Yeah, I think also just saying that He is capable of protecting us from the evil of the world. He is capable and He's powerful enough to deliver us from the chaos that is happening and that will happen. It's just something that is He's made very clear that, like, we will suffer, we will have our trouble. Like when He said, like, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, right? Like, it wasn't in this world you might have trouble, like you might have a bad day. Like, it's very much like in this world you will have trouble, but, like, you take heart because He has overcome the world. And so and just keeping that in mind and holding onto that truth during times like these that seem very out of our hands, like almost like we can't do anything, but just knowing that we can keep trying, keep fighting, and know that in the end, like, God has already overcome the world. So now we're gonna say some discussion questions that we're gonna talk about within ourselves, but we would love for you to have this discussion with your family and friends, and feel free to drop down your thoughts in the comment section below, because we'd love to hear what you have to say or what you think about our topic. So.
Absolutely. So first, for starters, we talked about how Jesus is teaching us to pray to God as a parent. How we start out with our Father in heaven. So what are some of the traits that you love or appreciate about your parents or parent figures that connect to the way that you appreciate God?
Some of the traits that I appreciate from my parents is that they're always supportive and the love they give. It reminds me every day of what God does for me. Our parents, they love us unconditionally, and God, the same as well, He loves us more, with a love that we don't understand. Our parents, they're always supporting us, and God, He He helps us make our choices, and sometimes, we don't always make the right one, but He's always there to follow up on what's happening in our lives. Like when temptation comes, God comes and He pulls us away from it. And God just He never releases our hand, and that's something that I think is
So it talks about asking for forgiveness in this prayer. Have you ever felt like you'd done something that you couldn't be forgiven for?
I certainly have felt that way in many scenarios, in many cases. There's times where I just feel like there was times that I felt like I couldn't be forgiven, but I always remember that it says in the Bible that God's always going to forgive us as long as He's always going to forgive us.
Absolutely. I'm in the same boat. I felt like there were times where I'd done something so wrong that I couldn't be forgiven. And then I remember this and Jesus saying, well, no matter what you've done, you can ask God for forgiveness. I think that's a super important thing. And I mean, Jesus forgave somebody who was hanging on a cross next to him. Paul had gotten Christians killed, and then God forgave him and made him be a part of the work that God was doing in the world. So it's just a reminder that we can always ask for forgiveness, and God is always willing to come and help us to be a part of God's kingdom again.
All right, thank you guys so much for joining us this week again. Make sure you drop in your thoughts and comments down below, subscribe and like, and that's our cue, I guess.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye,
We'll see you next week.
guys. See you next week.